The first time I saw it happen, my heart almost stopped. The small diner smelled of fried food and bleach, the kind of place where locals gossip over coffee and the hum of conversation fills the air like a soft blanket. I was sitting near the window, nursing my chocolate milk, when a shadow crossed over the corner of my vision. A boy no older than 8, dark-skinned, small, timid, clutching a worn-out backpack, was trying to order a burger at the counter. His voice was soft, almost apologetic, and that's when it happened. A larger, older boy, at least twice his size, leaned over and slapped him across the face. Not a playful slap, not a tap. This was pure aggression, meant to humiliate. The little boy froze, tears threatening to spill, his hand still clutching the counter as if holding on to something, anything for safety. People gasped. Some whispered. A waitress hurried over. But the bully just laughed, puffed up with his own sense of twisted power. And here I was frozen, staring, feeling that prickling sense in my chest, the one that says you are about to witness something that will change lives. Did anyone else see this? Could someone finally stand up for him? My mind raced, and then a thought hit me, sharp and impossible to ignore. What if this little boy's story was far bigger than this single painful moment? Because you see, the truth is that sometimes life hides its most shocking secrets behind the most ordinary faces. This boy, timid and trembling, was not just any child in a small-town diner. He carried something invisible but monumental in the air around him, a power, a legacy, and a family story that not a single person in that room could have guessed. And the man who would avenge this humiliation, his father, was someone no one would ever dare cross. A man whose influence reached far beyond this diner, far beyond the town, far beyond the imagination of anyone in that room. He was the boss of the Mafia. Yes, you read that right, the boss. The one whose reputation alone made people think twice before taking even a single wrong step. And yet here in this bright, harmless-looking diner, his son, a little boy in a hoodie and backpack, had just been struck by a bully who had no idea what he'd just done. I wanted to rush over to comfort the boy, to tell him it would be okay. But the fear in the air was thick, the kind that makes you hesitate, makes you wonder if stepping in will make things worse. And in that hesitation, I realized something important. Life sometimes tests people in the smallest, most ordinary moments, yet the repercussions can be enormous. The question that ran through my mind, the one that made my heart pound like a drum in my chest, was this: would anyone here dare to defend him, or would they watch helplessly as the consequences of bullying unfolded in ways they could never imagine? Little did anyone in that diner know that the moment the bully struck that little boy, it set off a chain reaction that would shake the entire town. The tables, the coffee cups, the ketchup-stained menus, they were all about to bear witness to something far bigger than anyone could predict. And as the boy's eyes filled with tears, a quiet determination flickered across his small face, the kind of determination that can only come from bloodlines, from legacy, from knowing deep down that you are not as powerless as you seem. So, I ask you, as you hear this story, what would you do if you saw someone you loved humiliated, knowing the person responsible had no idea who they were messing with? And if you believe in standing up for justice, even in the most unexpected ways, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss how this story unfolds. After the slap, the diner fell into a strange hush, the kind where even the background chatter seems to hold its breath. The little boy wiped his face with the back of his hand, trying to ignore the sting of humiliation, but I could see it in his eyes, anger mixed with fear, confusion, and a quiet strength that didn't belong to a child his age. He moved toward the corner booth, clutching his backpack like a lifeline, and sat down, his shoulders tense, as if bracing for the next blow. His name was Marcus. Everyone called him quiet, polite, almost invisible. He had a laugh that was soft but genuine, a smile that could light up a room if he let it, and a way of observing the world that made him seem older than his 8 years. He lived with his father in a house that the neighborhood knew only in whispers. His father was a man of immense power and influence, though to the outside world, he was just another businessman. The truth, however, was far darker, far more complex. His father was feared by many, revered by others, and utterly untouchable. a man who commanded loyalty, respect, and obedience in a world where power often came with ruthless consequences. But Marcus didn't know the full weight of his father's world. His life was a carefully shielded one. At school, he blended in, played soccer with the other kids, and never let on about the strength running through his veins. He knew that his father's world was dangerous, unpredictable, and unforgiving. He had learned early that silence was sometimes safer than speaking, that observation could save him when confrontation would be catastrophic. And yet, there was something in him that refused to be completely invisible, a spark that would not be snuffed out no matter how much the world tried to suppress it. The bully, on the other hand, was a different story entirely. His name was Tyler, 14 years old, confident, spoiled, and cruel. He thrived on attention, loved the shock and fear he could inspire, and never considered the consequences of his actions. Tyler thought the world revolved around him, that no one could or would challenge his dominance, especially a small child like Marcus. He had no idea that by striking Marcus, he had crossed an invisible line, one that would eventually lead to a reckoning he could never foresee. As Marcus sat in the corner, he slowly pulled out a notebook from his backpack, flipping it open to a page filled with carefully written words and sketches. Drawing had always been his way to escape, to make sense of a world that sometimes felt hostile and unmanageable. Today, though, the sketches were different. They were darker, heavier, as if his hand unconsciously tried to channel the anger, the fear, and the confusion bubbling inside him. Marcus knew that the world wouldn't always be fair, but he also knew that he had a way to make sure no one ever dared to touch him again. Meanwhile, Tyler lingered by the counter, smirking and talking loudly to his friends, completely unaware that the events he had set in motion would not be forgotten. The waitress kept an eye on him, her patience wearing thin, but she didn't dare confront him directly. No one dared to confront him. And in that moment, Marcus's small frame seemed insignificant, almost fragile, yet within him, an internal storm was brewing. A storm that was about to reshape, not only his own life, but the lives of everyone around him. Little did anyone know, Marcus's father had been keeping tabs on him in ways no ordinary parent could. He had eyes and ears everywhere, subtle and discreet, ensuring that Marcus was never truly alone or unprotected. The father knew the dangers, the threats, the bullies that could harm his son, and though he had kept a strict distance, always allowing Marcus to grow independently, there were moments when the world tested boundaries that could not be ignored. Today, Marcus had been tested, and now the silent machinery of consequences was already beginning to move. By the time school let out that afternoon, Marcus had already replayed the diner incident 100 times in his mind. The sting on his cheek, the mocking laughter, Tyler's cruel words, they all danced in his thoughts like shadows he couldn't shake. Most kids would have buried it, tried to forget, or told a teacher. But Marcus had learned long ago that some problems required more than just words. They required patience, observation, and strategy. And though he was small, his mind was sharp, honed by years of understanding how powerful his father was, and how a single misstep could spiral into chaos. When he walked home, backpack bouncing, sneakers scraping the pavement, he noticed things differently. The world felt quieter, slower, as if it was holding its breath along with him. He passed Tyler's house, noticing the windows, the garage, the little imperfections in the lawn that might one day become leverage. Marcus had never wanted trouble, never wanted confrontation, but today the scales had tipped. Something deep inside him refused to accept humiliation, and more importantly, he knew that inaction wasn't an option. He felt a burning question in his chest. How do you fight back when the world expects you to stay small and silent? That night, Marcus's father called him into the study. The room smelled of leather and polished wood, with a faint hint of cigar smoke lingering in the air, a sign of power and authority. Marcus stepped in cautiously, but his father's gaze, calm and intense, made him straighten instinctively. He had been expecting this call, though he didn't yet know how his father would react. "Tell me about your day," his father said softly, not with anger, but with a weight that made Marcus feel like his words carried far more importance than usual. Marcus recounted the diner incident, each detail meticulously, each emotion carefully measured. He spoke of the slap, the tears, the laughter, Tyler's friends egging him on. His father listened, silent but fully present, and when Marcus finished, there was a pause that seemed to stretch into eternity. "You've done nothing wrong," his father finally said, voice calm but carrying an unmistakable undertone of steel. "But the world doesn't always see that. People act cruelly because they think they are untouchable. They don't realize that their actions have consequences far beyond what they imagine." Marcus felt the weight of those words. He understood instinctively that his father's world was not one of idle threats. When his father spoke, the air shifted, and even in the quiet of their home, Marcus could almost feel the invisible network of power surrounding them. And then Marcus asked the question that had been burning inside him since the diner. Could he, just a little boy, ever make sure Tyler learned that some actions carry consequences he would never forget? Could he stand up without fear, using the resources he didn't yet fully understand, the power that ran through his blood, to ensure justice in a world that often overlooked the small and the weak? As his father's gaze softened, Marcus felt a strange combination of fear and exhilaration. His father placed a hand on his shoulder, firm but reassuring. "You have more power than you think," he said, "but power is dangerous. It can protect or it can destroy. The choice is yours. Remember that." That night, Marcus went to bed with a plan forming in his mind. It wasn't about revenge, not entirely. It was about balance, fairness, and ensuring that no one ever again could touch him or someone he cared about with impunity. Outside, the quiet streets seemed almost ordinary, but in the shadows, in the corners of the town, Marcus could sense the subtle shift. The first moves had been made, the chain reaction set in motion. And for Tyler, oblivious and careless, the consequences were already creeping closer, faster than he could imagine. The next morning, the world seemed deceptively normal. Marcus walked to school with the same quiet demeanor, backpack slung over one shoulder, sneakers clicking softly against the pavement. But beneath that calm exterior, his mind was racing. He replayed the diner incident again, analyzing Tyler's behavior, the angles, the friends who had egged him on. He realized that if he was going to make anything right, it wouldn't be through anger or yelling. It would have to be through patience, strategy, and timing. Marcus started small, observing Tyler more closely than ever before. He noticed the predictable routines, the way he strutted through the halls with his gang of followers, the way teachers often let him slide, because he was just a troublemaker kid. Every gesture, every careless comment Tyler made became a piece of the puzzle. Marcus knew that knowledge was power, and he intended to use it carefully. Meanwhile, whispers about the diner incident had begun to circulate. Some students pitted Marcus, others envied his quiet confidence. No one, however, knew the full story or the consequences that would soon unfold. Marcus began planting subtle seeds of awareness, small actions that hinted he was not someone to be pushed around. A notebook misplaced, a whispered warning to one of Tyler's friends, the kind of moves that made Tyler glance over his shoulder more often than usual, questioning the security he had always taken for granted. At home, Marcus spoke briefly to his father about the plan he had in mind, careful not to overstep boundaries. His father listened, nodding occasionally, offering advice in the way only a man with immense power could. "Remember," his father said, voice steady, "the goal is not just revenge. It's respect. Power is not a toy. You wield it wisely and people will notice. Abuse it, and the cost will be far greater than you think." Marcus felt the weight of those words. He understood instinctively that what he was about to do required precision. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and it could backfire spectacularly. By midweek, subtle changes had started to ripple through Tyler's world. His friends began to notice him hesitating, questioning decisions he had never questioned before. A misplaced notebook, a whispered rumor about a mysterious connection Marcus had, and Tyler's confidence began to falter. No one could see Marcus at work. He remained quiet, unassuming, but the effect was undeniable. Marcus had become a shadow, moving invisibly, changing the dynamics without a single overt confrontation. And yet, the real challenge was coming. Marcus knew Tyler would not simply accept subtle humiliation. The bigger the power imbalance, the more likely the bully was to push back violently. Marcus had to anticipate every move, every reaction. He spent evenings crafting scenarios, imagining outcomes, and preparing contingencies. For a child of 8, his strategic thinking was remarkable, honed by years of observing the world through the lens of his father's influence. Soon, the first unavoidable confrontation arrived. Tyler cornered Marcus near the playground after school, smug grin plastered across his face. He was louder, bolder, trying to assert dominance, to humiliate Marcus in front of his peers. But Marcus did not flinch. He met Tyler's eyes, steady and unyielding. Something in Marcus had shifted, a quiet fire ignited by the injustice he had endured. Tyler felt it, even if he couldn't name it, a subtle unease crawling up his spine. Marcus's calmness, his deliberate confidence, was unnerving. At that moment, Tyler realized that Marcus was no ordinary target. Something about him had changed. The way he stood, the way he held himself, even the slightest twitch of a smile, it was as if Marcus had become untouchable. And unbeknownst to Tyler, every move he made was being observed, recorded, and cataloged by invisible eyes. The first real consequences were on the horizon, and the boy who had been struck in a diner was no longer defenseless. By Friday, the tension had become almost tangible. Marcus had meticulously orchestrated every small move to unsettle Tyler. But now it was time for the next phase of his plan. He walked to school that morning with the same calm demeanor, backpack in place, sneakers hitting the pavement with quiet authority. Inside, his mind was alive with calculations. Every word, every glance, every action had to be perfect. This was not a moment for mistakes. One wrong step could expose him, and he knew the consequences would not be minor. Tyler, meanwhile, had grown increasingly paranoid. The subtle tricks Marcus had played, whispers, misplacements, glances, carefully timed observations, had begun to eat away at his confidence. He felt the walls closing in, the quiet realization that the boy he had once thought weak was far more dangerous than he could comprehend. Yet Tyler was still reckless, fueled by his own arrogance, convinced that he could intimidate anyone with a raised fist or a loud voice. The first real confrontation came during lunch. Marcus had chosen the cafeteria carefully. The room was full, buzzing with the chaos of students, but Marcus's presence radiated calm control. Tyler approached, fist clenched, ready to assert dominance. But Marcus had prepared every detail. Friends who had once cheered Tyler on now hesitated, unsure of the shift in power dynamics. It was subtle, but effective, the ripple of doubt spreading faster than Tyler could process. "You think this is funny?" Tyler spat, his voice harsh and trembling slightly. Marcus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he let the silence stretch, letting the room absorb the tension. Then, in the calmest voice imaginable, he said, "You've forgotten one thing, Tyler. Some actions have consequences far beyond what you see." The words hit Tyler like a cold wave. There was a pause, a moment where the arrogance faltered, a flicker of fear in his eyes. Outside, unseen by Tyler and the other students, a black SUV rolled slowly down the street, windows tinted, the engine low and deliberate. Inside, Marcus's father watched through a discreet camera feed. Every move was visible to him. And while he had allowed Marcus to take initiative, he had also ensured he could intervene if necessary. Today, intervention wasn't needed yet. Today, observation was enough. Marcus was learning, growing, demonstrating the subtlety and strength that his father had always known existed. By the end of lunch, Tyler was already shaken. He had not been physically hurt, not yet, but the psychological shift was undeniable. Marcus's calm and strategic approach had undone months of Tyler's assumed dominance in mere hours. Students whispered, glances were exchanged, and Tyler's friends began to question their loyalty. Even the teachers noticed a change, though they didn't yet understand what had caused it. Marcus had won the first real victory, not with fists, but with intellect and subtle manipulation, showing that even the smallest, quietest person could alter the dynamics of power entirely. That evening at home, Marcus's father sat him down once again. "You've done well," he said, his voice low and measured. "But this is only the beginning. Real power requires not just strength, but wisdom. Every move you make will have consequences, some expected, some not. You must always be prepared." Marcus nodded, understanding the weight of those words. He felt both pride and anticipation, knowing that the next steps would test him in ways even more intense than the diner incident. The quiet before the storm had passed. Tyler had been shaken, but his arrogance and recklessness remained. Marcus's father had chosen to stay in the background, watching, guiding silently, ensuring his son learned lessons without fully revealing the reach of his influence. The next phase, Marcus knew, would require careful planning, timing, and courage. Soon, the bully who had once struck him would face consequences he could not escape. And Marcus, the boy who had been humiliated, was no longer just a child. He was a strategist, a force in motion, and the story was about to reach its climax. The weekend brought an uneasy calm to the town. Marcus spent his time quietly preparing, reflecting on everything that had happened, and imagining the final steps of his plan. He wasn't driven by vengeance alone. He wanted fairness, balance, and to make sure no one ever again underestimated him. And yet, despite the careful planning, there was a thrill in knowing that the moment of reckoning was near. The bully who had humiliated him in the diner was about to discover that actions, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, could carry consequences far beyond imagination. Monday morning arrived, bright and ordinary in appearance, yet charged with anticipation. Tyler walked into school with a forced confidence, still unaware of the storm approaching. Marcus, calm and composed, observed every detail, every movement. His father's silent presence lingered like a shadow, unseen but palpable. Marcus knew that Tyler had no idea what was coming, and he relished the quiet satisfaction of preparation. The cafeteria, once a place of laughter and chatter, now seemed like a stage waiting for its final act. When Tyler tried to intimidate Marcus again, the response was unexpected. Marcus didn't flinch, didn't apologize, didn't beg. Instead, he calmly addressed the gathered students, detailing Tyler's pattern of bullying, the cruelty he had inflicted not just on Marcus but on others, and the consequences that were already underway. He did it with a precision and confidence that stunned the room. The whispers grew louder, students shifted uneasily, and even the teachers began to pay attention. Tyler's friends hesitated, unsure where their loyalties truly lay. The moment of true reckoning came when Tyler received an unexpected visit. The black SUV, the same one that had silently followed Marcus's moves, pulled up outside the school. From inside, Marcus's father stepped out, imposing and unmistakable, a presence that radiated authority and power. Tyler froze, his arrogance draining instantly. He had no idea who this man was at first glance, but the aura of control and consequence was unmistakable. Marcus watched calmly, knowing that the weight of his father's influence would now intersect with the lesson he had started himself. Tyler was escorted to a private office where he faced Marcus's father. The conversation was brief, calm, but carried a tone that left no room for misunderstanding. Tyler's previous bravado evaporated, replaced by an overwhelming understanding that he had crossed a line he could never undo. He had humiliated a boy he thought was powerless, but in doing so, he had unknowingly challenged a family with influence, strategy, and the capacity to make consequences unavoidable. By the time Tyler left the office, he was visibly shaken, humbled, and transformed. He would never again strike, mock, or assume that anyone was beneath him. Meanwhile, Marcus walked through the halls of his school, head held high, a quiet smile on his face. He had learned that power is not about brute strength, but about intelligence, patience, and understanding the stakes. He had also discovered that even in the smallest, quietest individuals, courage could blossom into something unstoppable. The boy who had been slapped in a diner was no longer a victim. He had claimed his dignity, protected his honor, and ensured that justice was served not recklessly, but with careful precision. That evening at home, Marcus's father placed a hand on his shoulder once again. "You've done well," he said, pride and approval mingling in his voice. "Remember this lesson. Power and respect are intertwined. Use them wisely, and you will always be able to protect what matters most." Marcus nodded, understanding the full weight of those words. The fear, the humiliation, and the anger had transformed into something stronger: confidence, strategy, and respect. The world was no longer a place where he could be struck and left powerless. He had become a force to be reckoned with, and the memory of the diner incident would forever remind him, and anyone who dared challenge him, that actions have consequences and justice can come from the most unexpected places. The story ends not with violence, but with transformation. The bully humbled, the boy empowered, and the father's shadow ensuring that his son would always have the protection, guidance, and strategic insight to navigate a world that often underestimates the quiet and the clever. Marcus had taken the first step into a life where courage, intelligence, and subtle power combined to create true justice, and he would never forget it.